Hey book nerds, welcome to my channel. So today I have a bit of a different setup, as I'm sure you've noticed, because it's Christmas! Yay! And I'm home for Christmas now, so I thought I would do some filming by this lovely tree since I have it. Yeah, I'm also going to do my December mid-month wrap-up. So far in December I have read 14 books, which I'm very happy about. I am 6 books away from hitting my goal of reading 200 for the year, my new goal, because my old one was 100 and I smashed that. And I really hope I can do it. It's the 19th as I'm filming this. Yeah, so I'm not going to talk about all 14 now because that would be too long, so I'm just going to talk about as many as I possibly can, and you'll find out about the others in the end of the month wrap up. But I hope you're all having a wonderful Christmas, winter period, all that kind of thing, and I hope that you're having as good a reading month as I am. So the first book I read was a bit of a weird one, and it was Identity Crisis by Ben Elton. This I listened to an audiobook. I've read one book by Ben Elton before. I read, I forget the name of it now. But it was, Dead Famous, that was it, Dead Famous. And I really enjoyed that. This is a murder mystery crime book, kind of more of a police procedural thriller, I guess, about a detective who's investigating a murder. And it's the same detective in all the books. This hasn't got a rating because I'm not sure really what to rate it. And the person who's been murdered is a trans woman. And there's a whole bunch of different subplots and stuff going on. This book is really political, like really political. It mentions about Brexit, it mentions about trans people and pronouns and how gender's not a thing anymore, and it covers a huge range of topics. There's like sexism and all that kind of stuff, and I didn't really know what the author was going for. Half the time I felt like I was reading a book written for middle-aged people by middle-aged people, just kind of talking about how crazy the kids are today, and then the other half it felt like he was poking fun at people who don't appreciate gender identities and that kind of thing. It was very uncomfortable to read. I found it like too political. Like there's nothing in this book that happens that isn't related to some kind of political correctness thing. And it kind of took things to extremes in a mocking way a lot of the time. So it'd be like, I don't know, there'd be characters having discussions about pronouns and relationships that I'm sure someone somewhere it does think that way, but the majority of people don't, and it just felt like it was very reductionist. I felt a bit on edge the whole time I was reading this because I didn't know where it was going. And the ending's just very weak as well. The actual solution to the murders isn't particularly great. And yeah, I didn't hate it, and I felt like I should have hated it based off its content. I wouldn't really recommend this book to anyone. I think if you've read his other stuff is better. I do need to read more of his stuff, but I felt like his commentary on reality TV, which was the plot of the one that I read, Dead Famous, was about people getting murdered on a Big Brother type show. I felt like he nailed the commentary for that, and it was kind of mocking the system rather than the people who take part in it. And if it was mocking anyone, it was punching up, whereas this felt a lot of punching down humour, and it's just kind of hard to explain, so I did feel very uncomfortable. I'm not sure how I felt about it on the whole. The next book I read I really loved, and that is The Cheerleaders by Corry Thomas. Sorry, I just gotta get the angle right. There you go. I hope you can see that. This is a young adult thriller. This was on one of the 2018 releases I wanted to read in 2019. And I really loved this. I gave it 4.5 stars out of 5, which is really high for me. This is about a girl whose sister was a cheerleader, and these different tragedies happened to the cheerleaders all around the same time. So 2 of them got murdered at a house. Her sister died in a car crash, and then I forget what happened to the other one. Someone else died through some other method. And she's kind of investigating what happened to her sister, whether it was related to some other stuff. It's mostly about her dealing with her grief and also befriending this super cool character. I think her name was Ginny. And they kind of formed this friendship. And yeah, I just loved it. There's a lot going on in this book, and I'm getting it a bit confused with a book I read later on in the month, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, which is why I'm not too clear on the plot aspects. But I really, really loved this book. I remember very strongly. The characters were great. I loved the way it dealt with grief. It was really interesting. It had a similar feel to Sadie in a way. It's not quite as brutal as Sadie from what I remember, but it has a similar feel to it. And similar kind of characters, and like things that I liked about Sadie I liked about this one. And yeah, it's just the way, I'm not going to spoil anything, but the way it ended was what bumped it up to a 4.5 star for me. It's got a couple of twists and stuff I didn't see coming, and yeah, I just really loved it. It was really, really good. I'm so glad I read it. I think it's the second book by the author that I've read, and I've enjoyed them both, so I definitely need to check out all of her work because it's really good. The next book was another one I finished on audio, and that is The Search by Howard Linskey. This is one of those authors that I had on my list. I had like top 10 authors I have to read in 2019. This is one of the last ones I had to cover. This is a police procedural. It is about this detective who's investigating a bunch of children were murdered by this guy who's in prison, and in particular one little girl was murdered, and they never found her body, and the murderer refused to own up to that crime. He did at one point, but then he backtracked, and now he is dying, the murderer is dying, and he says that he'll tell this detective what really happened if the detective does some stuff for him. And it's kind of like a cat and mouse game a little bit, but except the mouse is already caught. But it's kind of like that dynamic between them, if you understand what I mean. This was alright. I'm not the biggest fan of police procedurals, and this wasn't really an exception. It seemed very well written. I was kind of invested in what happened and what was going on. I wasn't particularly surprised by the ending, but I wasn't particularly, like, the characters didn't draw me in, so it wasn't like I was be surprised anyway, because I just didn't care that much, but it was pretty good. I don't know if I'll read the other two books by this author now, because this is the one I was kind of most interested in. If I do, I think I might read them as physical books, because the audiobook I definitely found myself tuning out parts of it. This took me a long time to get through. I started listening to it halfway through November, and I finished it on like the 1st of December. So yeah, it wasn't a fast listen for me, but I still would recommend it, and if you enjoy police procedurals, you'll probably like it a lot more than I do. The next book I read was Grim Lovelies by Megan Shepherd. This is again another one of the 2018 releases that I wanted to read in 2019. This is so good. I gave this 4 stars out of 5. This is a fantasy book, and it's about these teenagers who are animals that have been turned into people by a witch. So in this universe that they live in, there are witches, and their witch is murdered right at the start of the book, and then they realise that because she's dead, they have, I think it's 48 hours to make their spell permanent, or else they will just turn back into animals and they'll lose everything that they are. So these people go off on this little quest to make that happen. That's all I'm going to say about the plot, but I really, really loved this. I was surprised by how much I enjoyed it. I wasn't sure, obviously I was interested in it because I picked it up, but I wasn't sure how good it would be. Sometimes I'm not invested into fantasy as much as I want to be, but this was amazing. I was really into the characters. I loved the main character. I loved the side characters. I was really interested in the plot. It goes in cool directions that I wasn't expecting it to. The world building was good on the whole. There was just one minor thing which I hate to bring up, but it mentions like a boy band poster or something at one point, and it just completely took me out of this world, because it was like a real life boy band that exists in our universe, and I was in this little fantasy universe, so I didn't really know what was going on. That felt unnecessary. It felt like I shouldn't be in there. But it was really cool, and again, I'm not going to spoil anything, but the way this book ended made me so excited for the sequel, and that basically doesn't happen. not really much of a series reader, and it tends to take me a long time to get through series, and yet this one I was like instantly I'm going to buy the sequel. I'm planning to read it either the end of this month if I get through all my gold books, or start of January if I don't. But yeah, I just felt like the direction it took was really exciting, and I really, really wanted to read more. The next book I read was another audiobook, and that was Heroes by Stephen Fry. It's these white covers you have trouble seeing, isn't it? Yeah, the light is on it. I can't really do anything about that. There you go. That's what the cover looks like. This I gave 5 stars to. This was so good. I got this from my library, and it's basically, this is the sequel to his other book Mythos, which I've not listened to yet. I'm also waiting for that from my library, but this one came through first, so I read this one first. You don't need to read them, they're just retellings of the Greek myths, but they're read by Stephen Fry, told by Stephen Fry, and I just love the way he does it. It's so accessible. It was really interesting. I'm really interested in Greek mythology anyway. I had loads of books about it as a child, and it kind of covers all the usual suspects, but then it brings in some that I was unfamiliar with, which was really cool. I love the way he tells them. He does kind of Terry Pratchett-esque asides and stuff, and like Lemony Snicket comments, and it was all really good. I would definitely recommend the audiobook. I love Stephen Fry narrating audiobooks, and this was such a good experience. I can't wait until I get the first one and I'll definitely listen to it as soon as I can when I get it, because yeah, I would definitely recommend this. It's so good. The next book I read this month was The Window by Amelia Brunskill. This is the one that I got slightly confused with the Cheerleaders, but this one wasn't as good, so this was 3.5 stars. This is a young adult thriller, and this is about a girl who, her twin is found dead, having fallen out of a window, and the police say it was an accident. She's not convinced it was an accident, so she starts investigating her sister's death to try and work out what happened to her, if she was really keeping all these secrets from her. They're identical twins, by the way, and yeah, this was really, it was good. I think if I hadn't read the Cheerleaders so close to it, I don't know if I would have enjoyed it more, actually. That doesn't seem fair, but it was just not, it was more of a, the plot was more basic, so I knew where this one was going. There was an early thing that happened that made me think that someone was going to be the person behind it, and then it was quickly discussed in the narrative, which I'm really happy that that happened, because I was worried that it was meant to be a big twist, and it was super obvious, and it wasn't, so that was good. That was kind of a nice touch. The main character was alright. I liked the exploration of her and her relationship with her identical twin. I thought that was interesting. The kind of romance aspect was done really well as well, and the conclusion was fine. It was satisfying. I just think there wasn't much of a mystery going on. I was invested in the story, but I could quite easily guess what was going to happen. I guessed quite early on what was going on, and I was right, so it was good. It was still 3.5 stars, and I would definitely recommend it if it sounds interesting to you. It's just, it didn't blow me away, and if you only want to read like one young adult thriller of the ones that I'm talking about, I would definitely pick the Cheerleaders. It was a lot better and done, executed much better as well. Next we have another audiobook, and that is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was so good. I finally jumped on the hype wagon. I listened to the audiobook and I gave it 4.5 stars out of 5. It wasn't quite a 5-star read, that might change in the future. This was so good, and it was such a good audiobook as well. I wasn't sure how I'd get invested into a story like this. This is about a woman called Evelyn Hugo, and she was a movie star in the 60s, I think. Maybe, yeah, 60s, 70s, maybe a bit earlier or later, and it's basically about her life, and no one really knows. She's had 7 husbands. There's a lot of mystery surrounding her, and she invites this reporter into her home to give an interview about her life. She wants this reporter to write a book about her, essentially. This was really good. I loved Evelyn Hugo. She was such a great character. I think even if you don't agree with all the decisions she makes and all the things she does, she was a really interesting female character to read about. I was surprised by how into this type of story I got. I wasn't really sure if it was my type of genre, and I heard loads of people rave about it. I didn't know whether to buy into the hype, but yeah, I'm so glad I tried it, because it was fantastic. It just is told in this brilliant style. Trigger warnings: there is abuse in this, like an abusive relationship. There is hints of racism and stuff surrounding it, but not as much as I was actually expecting based off what I've heard other reviewers say. I thought that was a very minor thing. There is sex in this, and I think those are all the trigger warnings I can think of. Yeah, so this covered quite a lot of topics in a very interesting way. Like I said, the race element was as strong as I thought it would be, and that wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but I was surprised by it considering that I've heard certain things from other reviewers. Yeah, I don't really want to say anything else about this book because I really enjoyed it, and I went in almost entirely blind, and I was ill and I listened to it basically in an entire day, and it was just such a lovely experience. So yeah, if you're on the fence about picking this up, I would just say go for it, because I know it's overhyped and I know everyone talks about this book, but it really is that good. So I think you should at least try it if it sounds like something you might even vaguely be interested in. The next book, sadly, was a DNF, and that was Blanca Iroha by Anna-Marie McLemore. Another white cover that you can't really see. There you go. This I tried so hard to finish. This was on my 2018 releases to read in 2019 list. And I got about, it's only like a 280 page book, I think, and I got like 130 pages in and I just couldn't read anymore. This is about two sisters. And one is born like super pale with blonde hair, and one is born, I think she's got darker skin and she's got red hair, and essentially in their family, everyone in their family always has two daughters, and one of them, when they turn 15, always gets taken by these swans and turned into a swan. So it's like a magical realism type story. This was just the writing style. Like, first of all, there are 4 narrating characters. I was expecting the 2 sisters to be the narrators, and they are, but then there's also these 2 boys. One is a gender fluid person, and I'm forgetting the details now, but I think they lean more towards being a boy, or they're a yeah, I can't remember the exact scenario, but there's 2 other people as well, so there's 4 narrators in total. And it was just too much. It was too many narrators. It swapped too quickly, so you got both the sisters' point of view and it's kind of setting up the swan thing, and then it switched to these 2 other characters, and something magical realism-y is happening to them as well. And then I think there's a time skip, or I don't know what happened basically, but it alternated between all 4 of them always, so you only got one from each point of view, and then it would go like cycle through them all. And it felt like there's a lot of information dumped at the start, and then nothing really happened that much. One thing that really bothered me is these 2 sisters, you get their physical descriptions at least once a chapter, if not more. It's insane. It is just like one of them's never referred to anything else other than the red-haired sister. Like, they've got names but they don't use them. It's just always harping on about their hair colour and their skin colour, and it was just too much. Like, I get that it's the main theme of the book, that they look different and they don't know which ones the swans are going to take, but it was way too much, so I just couldn't. I gave up. I couldn't read it. I'm sorry. You might like this if you like really flowery writing, or you like more weird stories where you can't really grasp what's going on, but the repetition bothered me and the writing style bothered me, and I just could not get invested in it, so I did not finish it. And the final book I'm going to talk about fully is Blood Sisters by Jane Corry. This was so good. This is a thriller. I gave this 4.5 stars out of 5, which is really high for a thriller for me. This is one of the authors that I really wanted to read this year, and I'm so glad I picked this up. So this is about a woman, and she has got some kind of thing that happened in her past that she is trying to atone for. and she's an art teacher, and she starts teaching art in a prison. Our other character is a brain damaged woman who is living in a care home, and it's told from her point of view, and she can kind of think, she can't remember what happened to her, but she can think through I don't know what the right terminology is to use, but she thinks kind of like any other character. It's just that she can't communicate properly. And it's about these two women. I don't really want to say anything more than that, but this was super interesting. So there's a lot that happens in this book, like a lot, and it's all executed really well. It's paced fantastically. There are several events that happen. I will say that they are twists, but I think they surprised me. But I think even if you didn't know what they were, like even if you guessed what they were, then you would still be invested in the story because it takes it in different directions. The fact that one of the narrating characters was a woman with brain damage was such an interesting concept, and it was done really, really well. And I loved that it went somewhere that I've never seen any thrillers go. Yeah, it was just fun. It was really good. The ending was so satisfying, which again never happens. It was really interesting. I loved it all, and I cannot wait to pick up the other books by this author because I've got about 3 other ones on my TBR by her, and I'm so happy now that I read this one because it's such a good thriller, and I'm always looking for great thrillers. So if you've not read anything by her, I mean, I really recommend Blood Sisters because I've not read any of the others, but it was really cool. It's not like groundbreaking, which is why it wasn't 5 stars. It didn't blow me out the water with how amazing it was, but just the fact that everything was so consistently great meant that I loved it on the whole. It was such, like I said, there wasn't really anything I would change about the story, which is great. So yeah, I definitely recommend this. I really enjoyed this book. And the final one I'm going to mention here, I'm not going to talk about it, but it's Not Even Bones. This is by Rebecca Schaeffer, and this is a fantasy book. I gave this 3.5 stars out of 5. The reason I'm not talking about it here is because I'm going to talk about it in a separate video because of the themes of it, and it kind of prompted me to think of a discussion video. But I just wanted to mention here because I think it's easier to just shove it at the end of this wrap up than at the start of the next one. But yeah, this was an interesting book, and subscribe or keep an eye on my content if you want to know what I thought about it. So those are all the books that I read in December that I'm going to talk about so far. Let me know if you've read any of them, if you think any of them sound really good and you want to know more about them. I'm always happy to answer any questions. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you've had a good December so far. If you did enjoy this video, if you give me a thumbs up, that will help me out massively, and I hope to see you next time.